meeting on today, February 28th, 2023. I would like to call this meeting to order. So if I could get a motion to call the meeting to order, Katie, and a second, Rebecca. Awesome. Thank you so much. Meeting minutes were sent out prior to our meeting, so I'm hoping that everybody got a chance to look at those. So if I could get a motion to approve those meeting minutes, if there are no questions. Nina? And second? Tian? Perfect. Thank you so much. So meeting minutes from last meeting have been approved. So let's move on to our agenda items for tonight. First is our reports from our subcommittees. And I'm going to try to do this off of memory. So if I miss one, I'm going to look to somebody to update me. But if we could have communications go first.
I took notes this time, so let me just pull up my notes, if that's okay. I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, so if anybody on communications has something else to add, just let me know. So we met on February 8th. We talked about 3 things that I noted. So the first was multicultural observances for the website regarding the school calendar. We talked about developing explanations for what the observances are, linking to potential books about holidays that are age appropriate, and perhaps soliciting student voices on holidays for possible social media posts. So those are sort of the discussion pieces that we had about that. The second thing we talked about was a status update on the DEI work for the first half of the year for the website. Matt, you were going to review that, and we were all encouraged to look at the website. You also gave us an update on the learning walks, the equity audit, and the fireside chats. The next one, I think, is in 2 weeks. I think it's on the 21st or something. And then the third thing we talked about was professional development, potentially approximately once a month or every other month, focusing on how to engage marginalized youth. So that's what I wrote down. I certainly could have missed something, but that's what we discussed.
Wonderful. Anyone else from the committee? Mr. Lassiter, you can do it. Like, go ahead. Go for it.
Hi, everybody. Our studio art kids are working on advertisements for the fireside chats. That was also one of the other things we talked about. So I spoke to Ms. Romano. I gave her the parameters we were talking about in terms of GPL, not being able to, support, not support, but basically be the sponsor. So I gave all the details. There's like 3 or 4 kids who are working on some advertisements that we should be able to push out here pretty soon. So I'm excited about seeing what the kids will do. So that was it.
That's really exciting. All right. So we'll move on. If there's not anybody else from the communications committee that would like to jump in with any updates. Okay. Community engagement. Anyone here from community engagement? I know we have a ton of fireside chats.
I can talk about this. Katie was with me at that day. I came earlier, but we have. I don't know how to comment on the attendance, but we have about 6 people there. So it's a good attendance to start with, and. I think there are a few maybe outstanding items that people raised. Talk about there's a there's a transgender student in Pine Bush, and there's some sort of lack of support. But I know that Matt helped a lot. But from what I heard from the parents, but we still need some support on that part. And people are talking about the communication between the administration of the school districts and the parents still kind of limited. Well, need to improve. They wanted to talk to more people in addition to the only teacher that of the class. You know, when they have issues, they try to find a way to communicate with the administration staff and stuff. They don't know what to do. But I think that's a good that's a good idea. You know, when we think about ideas, how to communicate with the parents. People are talking about the root cause of the discrimination and non-equal issue. I mean, we see some issues, but try how to dig out the root cause and try to solve to prevent this from happening from its base. That's I think that's quite important. Well, they also want to know the content of the professional development and training regarding the DEI. We didn't broadcast or advertise what this development training offered. You know, people are interested in this, especially for those who haven't had a chance to attend. That's all I made in my record. But I think it's a good form. It's basically a very positive feedback, at least in terms of the format of the fire chat format. Seems like at least the people obviously people who attend that will should like it. But I think if we do more broadcasting and let more people know, we should have increase the attendance increasing over the course. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Katie, you have something?
Sure. The only question I could put out to the group is with our goal with the fireside chat, there was a little bit of feedback regarding Board of Ed. I'm not sure that people recognized when providing it that I was a Board of Ed member initially. So that could go either way of either that's an opportunity for them to share that feedback, or if this group felt like maybe it would be an opportunity for them to ask those questions or provide feedback related to DEI regarding the board without a board member there. I don't know. I guess it's more of a question to the group, but that was one thing that I did notice from that is that, you know, we could see what is it that we're looking to provide the community with the opportunity for. So that would be the only other thing I would add.
Yeah, I think just to follow up on Katie's comment, someone emailed me, I guess, after that fireside chat. I was not there, but she said that there was a parent that stumbled into the meeting and maybe thought it was supposed to be about the buses or transportation. And I think they stuck around and talked about that. I don't know if Matt, if you could speak to that, but I don't know, maybe we could put like, well, now we'll have this artwork and design to advertise it. And so maybe we can have it over the door, because I wasn't there, but I was like, oh, I'm not really sure why they thought it was about transportation, but I guess they stuck around and talked about the buses for a while. So yeah, that was just a little bit of feedback too.
Matt?
So I'll just speak real quick to the library part and what we can do for advertising. It was already mentioned a bit in the communication subcommittee part, but the library, like on their billboard outside and also just in the building, like they only will advertise like specific programs that the library itself is running. So it's not specific to the district or this group, but they're saying no, we can't. But they are more than willing to give us the space, and they also said that we are absolutely welcome to have flyers up, just so long as we don't list this as like this is sponsored by the library. So those are kind of the parameters where we need to follow that, but we can definitely get stuff up in there, and I think that that'd be really powerful. Just patrons would see that in general, so they'll know where to go, and hopefully that will help. And I think we absolutely, in the times when we have them, can get something on the door, just a reminder of it. The size of the flyer, though, so like we can't do something that would be a billboard, but if it's just the regular size sheet of paper, we can have that. And I mean, everyone that I've spoken to at the library has been really, really great throughout this process. So they would definitely be fine for us to do that. So we're excited to see what our students at FMS come up with.
And I think that as we keep doing them and as it becomes more of a thing that folks know is specific to DEI, and even as we start reporting out and giving maybe updates about the fireside chats and things that we hear, that then folks who look at these recordings will be reminded that this is specifically for DEI. But if it does become an issue, maybe saying something during the board meetings, like, hey, if you're interested in going and talking about DEI, the fireside chats are about DEI concerns. So that way it just creates a lot more transparency. So the more and more we say it, I think definitely it'll be understood that that's the forum and that's the space for that. Anything else? Community engagement. Elizabeth, yes.
I had a question for Marie. I saw that you put out the something about the fireside chats in an email, blast all to the, everybody involved in the school district. And I just wonder, I think it said you're going to send out a list later of the dates or something, right? I don't think you've sent out the actual dates yet. Is that right?
That communication had a link to the dates, but we're going to do on like we do the communications on Fridays. So we'll always include it on the Friday before the following week when it happens. But all the dates are up on the website, and I'm pretty sure Patrice put a link to it. But we're getting ready to do another communication, so we can get going on that too.
And just so that this committee knows that the next date is March 21st from 12 to 1. Anyone else? All right. We can move on to the research committee.
All right. So the last time we met February 8th as a subcommittee. And that following week, Nick Harris was meeting with NIASP, and they were going to discuss the changes that needed to be done in order to get the survey out to everyone. The survey is going to be sent to approximately 2,000 plus individuals who are registered with this organization. So we're hoping to get a really big turnout. And we were talking about sending out like reminder emails. We were talking about like whenever we get surveys, like we'd like the reminders because we just forget to do them. So we were kind of trying to figure out like a timing to send those reminders and when. Ideally, the goal was to try to get these results, to get the survey out to the public by the end of February, beginning of March, in hopes that we'll have some data by spring break that we can start to look over some of the data and start to analyze it. We are going to have access to the raw data that comes out, and it's going to eventually be put out through a publication as well. We also talked about, so along with this NIASP organization that the survey is going out with, they also have a St. John's University background, like the research committee is also helping with this as well to make sure that it's a valid survey. And so I think this could be bigger than just statewide eventually, if we wanted to get that big, We talked about the survey. We also discussed so in my current district where I work, we have started our DEI and we are doing affinity groups for staff. So, and we were talking about what would that look like if, Gilliland did decide to do something like that. Because I'm in Schenectady where there is, a bunch of different cultures and different affinity groups that can be created. So I don't know if we want to talk about that now or if you want me to just keep going on what we talked about.
I'll hop in real quick and share something. So I said this at the research committee, but I think it's worth sharing with all of you here tonight as well. One of the projects that I am currently working on with my counterparts across different CAP region schools is to try to do broader affinity groups that will connect across districts. And as Tan pointed out, one of the areas that we were mulling over a lot is how this would look here, just based on our numbers of staff and the diversity that we currently have among staff. Because we certainly wouldn't want to accidentally end up marginalizing someone further. Like, let's say someone is the only person in a category, we don't want that to be like, oh, your affinity group is you. Like, so we want to make sure that people are able to have resources across similar roles. And I know I really benefit from times when I'm able to meet with folks across different areas. So seeing if we can have a bit of an intersection of some of that, like some of the work that already exists, like Schenectady, for example, and the different types of affinity groups. I mean, they're just research backed and they are incredibly powerful. And I don't mean to steal your thunder, Tan, so please cut me off. But just affinity spaces are research backed and they are powerful preventative tools for burnout for marginalized staff from marginalized communities. They also are very, very effective for like recruitment. So people know that, okay, once I land in this space, there's actually going to be a place for me there. So those are kind of some of the things that we were thinking about and that we talked about.
Just to piggyback off of that real quick, like I did some of the affinity groups for my school district, and like there was one of our groups only had two staff members in it. So that's going to be the other thing. Like if we decide to do these affinity groups, like how are we going to recruit people to want to go to these meetings and the importance of it, so there's that side of that too. We also spoke about, go ahead, Elizabeth.
What can you just remind me, what is the survey again, and who is it going to, and what is it all about? I can't remember what the survey is.
Matt, do you want to jump in?
Sure. So the survey is something that the research committee has been working on kind of throughout this year. And the purpose of it is to be able to gauge what other areas, what other districts are in schools, if they're like, smaller, what they're doing in the space of DEI. So some of the examples of questions it's gathering, like, how long have you been doing this work? What does this look like? And talking about different procedures, whether it's for hiring, things like that. Like, do you have policy? Do you have this, that, and the other? And it started when we first began. We did some of this research locally. And so everyone on the committee picked like 2 schools, maybe 3 in the area, and did some gathering from websites. I know people actually reached out to whoever they saw on the site and were like, hey, can I get some more information about this? What do you do in terms of cultural observances? And so when Dr. Harris joined our group, he has connections through NIAS, which is the New York Association of School Psychologists. He's the ethics committee co-chair and one of the executive board members. And he was like, well, if we have something that we want to be able to send out statewide, because honestly, I mean, there's so many schools that would take us forever to do that. Through this organization, we might be able to get something out faster. And long story short, there's been some meetings that have happened in the meantime, slight tweaks to the survey. We've gone back through and tried to fine-tooth comb things. And NIAS, their board really, really liked this. And they were not only in the space of, yeah, you can send this out. They're like, actually, we want to send this out and we want to be able to do some publication of the results that happen. So kind of what started off as an idea, amongst the 6-7 of us there, ended up becoming something that's broader where it's going to end up being published. And as Dan mentioned, St. John's University researchers are also doing some of this work, and it could really end up going broader. So what we're hoping to do afterwards with that, the raw data that in an ideal world we could get by the end of March. I don't want to, make any promises because, it's kind of out of our hands right now. But should we be able to have that, then over the course of our April meeting and even May, we'd be able to, make sense of this data and say, okay, here's what we have. Now, how does this apply to us and how can this enhance our current work? And what are some other places doing that we can learn from? Are there, places that have been doing this for 15 years? What are the stumbling blocks? And then we also might have new points of contact that none of us would know, just innately. So that's kind of the idea behind the survey. And that's the organization that we're working with. Well, I say we, but really, I have no connections to NIAS.
That's awesome.
All right, and then we also spoke about using, we were kind of wondering, is there a language line or service that, Gilderland uses for families or students that don't speak any English? What I said, from personal experience with me, so my grandmother's here visiting from Brazil, and I had to actually get this little translating earpiece. It just looks like an earbud, but it's actually, so she's able to put it in her ear, and when my husband and I are talking or the kids and I are talking, it translates it in Portuguese for her. So that might be something that so that way she's included in conversations all that we're having. So that might be something worth looking into if needed. And then the other thing we talked about was our group could, because we're all in education and we all do book studies in our own districts, we could put together a list of books for book studies that have to do with DEI. So that's something that we're working on as well. And that's it.
Awesome work. Excited about those earbuds, gotta say. I was like, oh, my kids can talk to my dad. That would be cool. All right. So student voice.
So we met on February 6th, and the first thing that we did was we sent out the form for FMS and GHS students to fill out so that they can express interest in joining our subcommittee. We talked about the importance of having representation of different groups and at different levels so that we can make sure that we're working for the best interests of the most amount of people. And then another action item that we talked about and will continue to discuss is a student-led focus groups so that students would feel more comfortable sharing. We thought if it was with their peers rather than with an adult, and it would be possible that some board members could be there too to answer questions and just enhance communication so that kids understand what happens at board meetings and their purpose and objectives. And we decided to do this because students go to other students with their issues more than they do adults. And we would definitely stress confidentiality and that we wouldn't be talking about specific individuals. And we're hopeful to start fleshing this out more next meeting. So there will definitely be more updates then.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maxine. Anyone else have any updates?
Yeah, I'll just chime in real quick about that survey Maxine mentioned that we shared out. So we got a really encouraging number of responses. So one of the things that we'll end up doing is, and we talked about this for a while, is trying to brainstorm and think, okay, how are we going to accommodate this number? So we had 65 responses come in. and something that Mr. Laster certainly made me happy about. 42 were from FMS students. And so there's definitely, if anyone ever questioned whether there's interest in people being part of this work, we certainly do have a lot of kids who are interested. That being said, part of our work is going to be figuring out, okay, so we have a lot of students who obviously do want to have their voices heard. And we also even had faculty and staff who expressed interest in being part of this too, which was really, really great. So we have people in different buildings who are saying, yeah, I want to help support this. So we're going to need to figure out effective ways to almost have subdivisions of the subcommittee, and break into different parts. Maybe those groups will meet at different times, but I think that this is a really, really positive platform, and a thing that is super encouraging to me personally from it is a very clear indicator that the work doesn't end when our current crop of leaders have finished graduating. The kids that have really been spearheading this work for the past 3 years, the vast majority of me, graduated at the end of this year. So, the candle still has a very, very strong flame in our Encanto. So, okay, I'm sorry. I'm
Love it.
sorry, but yes.
Love it. Yes, we don't want to put that flame out for any reason. Absolutely. So we're going to transition unless anybody else have any final thoughts on anything that they heard from the subcommittee reports. All right, awesome. So we're going to move on to DEI in action. Oh, Elizabeth. Go ahead.
So I have one comment, which is that I think, Matt, we met on February 2nd, right? Wasn't that the date? And no one showed up. Matt sat there by himself. Wasn't that the February meeting, Matt? Yeah, that was, right? So yeah, Matt sat there for 15 minutes by himself, and then I suddenly remembered and tuned in, and then we disbanded, and I think he was depressed. And so if anybody from our subcommittee is watching, maybe I'll send out an email or something and remind, because yeah, it was a very sad and ineffective meeting at the February meeting of the engagement subcommittee. I think what Lewis was talking about was the fireside chat, right? So
yes,
yeah, the actual engagement subcommittee did not go well this month. So FYI, we'll do better next month. Stay with us, Matt.
So I apologize, Matt, also because but I recused myself for the reasons. So yes, if folks are out there listening from the community engagement subcommittee, please attend those meetings. They really are wonderful meetings. So we will transition now to DEI in action. Matt?
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I do have to say, this past month, work across the different community subcommittees was pretty packed, as you heard, just even with us going through our reports. So I want to go through a few different things, but first, want to just address this being recorded instead of live stream like we have done in the past. As you may recall, if you're watching this video towards the end of our last meeting, we addressed the idea of live streaming versus recording just because of the technical work that needs to go into things on the back end, and just the fact that the folks who do that are pulled in a lot of different places at once, and perhaps the better option for this could be recording. So I just want to share out the results of those polls not polls plural, the single poll, for community members who are watching as well as for members of this committee. So the question was, what is your opinion on keeping our live stream format for our meetings versus moving away from live stream and maintaining a recording, which would be posted to our website? And so 55.6% of the vote went to, I think we should move towards posting a recording. And the remaining 44.4% was folks saying that they were fine either way. And so tonight, this is really a matter of circumstance because unfortunately, the folks who do the back work were unable to make it tonight due to just conflicts and personal things that end up happening, which it happens. But this is something that just based off of the poll that we did at the end of our meeting last time seems like a format that we're going to want to keep and move forward with. So I just wanted to articulate that part out. Are there any questions about that? It was fairly straightforward. It was just like, it was a one question poll. Yes, Elizabeth.
I think you and I talked about this, Matt, for a minute at that last engagement subcommittee. But I think we talked about this then. But like other Board of Education subcommittees, they're not televised, they're not broadcast, they're not recorded. Nobody wants to go to them anyway, like finance or something. You know, no one's clamoring to go. So it's not like we're trying to be secretive. Actually, this one is put out there for the community and stuff, unlike other subcommittees. So, you know, just it does seem to me like, you know, with the pandemic meetings have started to become, you know, remote, which has its good points and its bad points. It's very convenient for everybody. Bad points might be that members of the community can't actually come. They can't come and they can't comment or something, or ask questions or whatever, which they could if we were meeting in the high school or something. So this just seems to me like it's getting further and further away from the idea of doing it in real time, which is, you know, kind of a little bit too bad. But like I said, other subcommittees don't even, no one can go to them at all. You know, I have gotten before in real time emails from somebody commenting on something that was happening in the meeting. So that's all I'm wondering is like, you know, that aspect of it is going to be gone. So I just wanted to sort of remark on that. Just, I'm totally fine with either way, but I just noticed, you know, things, you know, so many meetings becoming less real time or possible to attend. So that's just a little bit too bad. We're not doing it for any nefarious reason, obviously.
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And yes, it really, I mean, we are still recording them to make sure that people are able to see the kind of conversations that we have. We want to make sure that they're still on the website. Because transparency is something that's definitely important to us. So thinking about the next topics, I want to just give some updates on things that are happening across the different buildings, or not the different, well, I should say the different levels. So we'll start at the elementary level. And one thing that has been really fantastic has been work that's going on related to Black History Month. Now, I mean, it's happening in all of our different buildings, but there are a couple of things that I want to be able to specifically highlight. Like one thing, I want to give a shout out just to real quick with Altamont 5th grade. And to be clear, this is happening everywhere at all grade levels. But this was something that I was fortunately able to see really just up close and personal while it was happening. So it just stands out. Altamont 5th grade, they had uplifting, it was Valentine affirmations for each student. So they all went through and if you've ever done an affirmation circle where everyone goes through and leaves something, so each kid got to see amazing things about themselves going into that day. And so that stood out because it was one of the things that existed even beyond Black History Month, where it was something that was part of just what was happening in the culture of the building. And so many of the messages were heartfelt. They went beyond platitudes of, oh, you're nice. It was like, I really like this about you because I feel good when I'm with you. Or you're a really good friend and you helped me with this. And so that was something that I loved seeing happen widespread. And again, to be clear, there's things like this that are happening all over the place. But I think that was really, really powerful. And I was fortunate enough to go into a few different classrooms and see some of the work play out. I'll just give one other example just because of time. With Linwood in a second grade room, doing some work. Again, it was around the power of affirming identities and the things that each person brings to the table. It was on a selfish note, a fantastic way to start off my birthday, because just seeing how happy kids were for one another, and how willing they were to affirm positive things about each other as well. Because there were some kids, it started with self-affirmations, and some kids were like, well, I don't really know what I like about myself. And kids were like, no, but you're so fast. Oh my gosh, you're so good at, and so just ranging from, and fast is the highest of high compliments for a second grader. So, just seeing those things play out, there was definitely a lot of charity, a lot of love. And I think our staff did a fantastic job in the way that they engaged students surrounding Black History Month. So moving on to the middle school level, one thing that I want to highlight was an art display that really kind of blew my mind. This was mirroring the works of Bisa Butler, who's a really, really talented artist that honestly I didn't know too much about until last month. And this was stuff where kids, again, were able to interplay with identity and see that reflected and do a lot of creation. They were able to use a wide range of things. And if you are a member of the FMS community and are able to see some of those art displays, I know obviously you've seen them, Mr. Laster, but like it's really, really incredible stuff and goes way beyond anything that I could create myself, if I'm just going to be honest. So that's just one of the examples of the types of things that are happening. But it was one thing that I definitely wanted to just highlight. And then at the high school level, I think a thing that I definitely want to lean into, there's two. The first being something that happened yesterday and today. It happened last year as well. There was some stuff with intersectional feminism. So, with Black History Month, and then also the start tomorrow with Women's History Month. And so BSU and Feminist Club did a collaboration across 2 days. And it, just really, really powerful work happening in that setting. And then also with our student focus groups, those have continued and been really, really powerful. I'm very excited for the next one that's coming up this Thursday. So 2 days from now in the morning, I'll have another group of students. And my favorite part about these, obviously the conversations are really important, but I really like that they even structurally are enduring, and that we are able to see such a wide range of students, and those smaller discussions are having a larger impact. And I've heard this from a lot of different kids across different groups. I've heard this from staff I've spoken to. I know the building level administration is definitely feeling impact from these. And no, obviously I'm not saying that we are perfect or that the work is done, but it is very encouraging to see that the work being underway in an effective manner. The last thing I'll say for DEI in action, I actually just got back last night from a student trip that I was able to chaperone. I went on one last year and I was able to do it again this year. And, I did the hard role. I took the job that, it was a big sacrifice that I made for the district, to be clear. I was forced to go to Paris and to Lucerne and to Munich, and it's okay. It's okay. You can send me condolence cards for that, but someone had to do it. So I stepped up. And what I really loved, it happened again this year. Students, their worldviews were just shifted. And in conversations that I had with parents as well following it, they could see it even in their children's faces. Messages that I got from parents during it, messages that the group leader, I just want to give a quick shout out to Curtis Snyder. He was the one who organized the trip. And even just the other chaperones that were a part of it. His daughter, Cassie, was phenomenal with it. Hildebrand, who's also a district employee at the high school. Really, it was just a solid group for the students and the staff. And it just affirms to me the value of these trips. And something that is really important to me is trying to figure out ways where we can increase access to those trips for more students, because the 28 that were there this year, as well as the roughly 30 from last year, all came back with a different and a broader and a more holistic worldview. And yeah, thank you for saying that, Julian. I really do. I'm like such a big believer in the power of these. And I think that, not that this is the exact charge of this DEI committee, but really if there are folks who know organizations that do support student travel, I would like to connect with them, because I think that it's so necessary to be able to have these opportunities persist. And yeah, just again, the students all phenomenal, and again, the chaperones, Curtis and I are the group leader, his daughter Cassie, Haley Vanderhoof, and then I took the hard spot of being the fourth. So just thank you everyone for that, and I'm grateful for. All right, Maxine, we don't need to. We had some karaoke time, and someone may or may not have given me a microphone. If you know me, that's a dangerous thing. You can't just be like waving a microphone around nonchalantly. I know Dr. Halchik, she was not just someone who waved a microphone, came into class one time and tossed me a microphone. So I mean, give me a mic, I will start rapping. So we had a great time. But overall, there's been some really phenomenal work happening at each of the levels this past month. So thank you, everyone.
Matt, quick question. So have folks thought about diversifying the locations where students go to? And I don't know if you've heard anything about that, but just thinking about the places that you mentioned, which are great, but also thinking through students seeing other areas or other parts of the world that maybe there are some large misconceptions about, might be cool too.
Yes. So, I mean, I can actually answer that right now. The answer is 100%. I'll give another shout out to Brent Autry. I know there's going to be a trip to Costa Rica next year, for example. And Curtis Snyder and I, we had actually talked, this was maybe 4 years ago, about a trip to South Africa. And in theory, they can go anywhere, but the tough part goes in with aligning it with our breaks and then the amount of days that the trips are. So those are some of the factors to consider. But in theory, they could go to a range of different places. Yes, Mike Laster.
I think it's a larger conversation about what experiences the school district is responsible for in terms of providing for students. Right now, one of the challenges we're dealing with is how do we provide a 8th grade field trip experience that is relevant, that is rewarding, but is also something that is affordable for our families. Traditionally, the middle school has sent the 8th grade to Great Escape. And right now, the amount of money that we would have to ask parents to pay for is a concern of mine. And I think that's a real challenge that we as a district need to face in terms of what we're providing for students. So I toss that out there as a challenge that we're dealing with right now, and like what we should be doing as a district in terms of solving that problem.
Thank you. And I am in 100% agreement with you. So I kind of at first been like, maybe that's not a charge of this committee, but I actually do think that it is something that we really need to consider, because the experiences that students are able to have, it really does matter. And thinking about ways to make sure that they're accessible and affordable to families is also huge. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I mean, I was also thinking about what the value in the experience is. And some of that is being exposed to, differences and people who are maybe not who we see in our hallways as much. And one of the things that I'm always looking for my students, especially with like National Junior Honor Society and, becoming adults, is community service opportunities, which don't have to be traveling and they don't have to be as far from home. And it doesn't have to feel like, oh, here we are going in and helping out at a food pantry or doing something like that. But what other things can we do in our own community that are supportive? And, this does connect to equity and recognizing that we have students in our own building that don't have as much as others. And what can we do so that students recognize that? Because I think we have a real challenge when it comes to Guilderland and everyone thinking, oh, everyone in Guilderland has everything. And anyone who knows our student body knows that that's not true, but it can be really alienating for a student who feels like that's the expectation of a Guilderland student. Because then they feel like that staff member who's the only person who goes to that affinity meeting, or they just feel like they're the only one, and kind of recognizing that we have a great breadth of experiences in our schools.
Thank you. Nina?
Hi, yeah. So we have similar in South Colony, we have similar things we're working through with our 8th grade as well. And for a while we were wondering if we were constricted to the school day for that reason as well versus coach buses. That's a whole other expense. And looking at the area, we thought about, like, because it's a large school district also, we thought about like having different subgroups, even like going down to the Capitol. And it's all, like the Schuyler Mansion, or all the different things that the area offers. But in a similar way, we were looking into Silver Bay, but I guess that fell through. That would have cost with coach buses like $60 a kid. But again, is that something more than we could do? But no, very similar, and then thinking about like, would going back to the purpose that you were talking about, which was like, do we just have the kids learn about the bonding experience of the time, and what can they get out of it? And how does that help, dealing with equity? Is that something that is a fair opportunity for all kids? We usually also have some kids that we end up covering the cost for that, because because we can't expect all families to be able to provide for that. So obviously that's also factored into the cost as well. But yeah, I echo that. And I think that, I don't know if that's like a PTA thing or something too that can be hit up, but it definitely, those are all areas that we also grapple with. But it's important, like the kids definitely get a lot out of it. And whether it's the bigger scale that in Munich, or if it's just I don't know, William Fort Henry or something that we could give them in our regional access. But it's definitely an important learning experience. So maybe the only thing they remember from the year. So that's important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, even just on a basic level, I still remember any of those elementary trips to like Proctor's, for example, those smaller shows. And yeah, it matters so much. And even if it's not that everything is completely subsidized, but if it's reducing the cost for everyone, or it's like we're able to have 1-2 scholarships per trip that are anonymous, I think that'd be really valuable. So we got a couple hands, so we'll start with Tyann and then Seema, and I'll go from there.
So speaking of the covering costs for students, I'm also the Linwood PTA president, and I know that I work closely with the social worker of Linwood, and she has families that have reached out to her that are families in need. And that's when the PTA steps in and we help out any way the family needs. Like we adopted them for Christmas this year, so we provided gifts for the children. They needed help buying a yearbook or buying like Linwood wear, like that's where the PTA steps up and we help with those costs. That could be one way that we help families that do need the help, as long as they reach out to school social workers and let the school know that they need that help. That'd be the first step, of course.
Thank you. That's very helpful to know, because PTAs are, that'd be a very powerful organization to pair with in each of the buildings. So next was Seema.
I just wanted to second Mike's comment about that this is definitely worthy of a longer discussion, or a bigger discussion, because it's come up in probably every building, and for different reasons. Like some trips are associated with clubs, some are classroom trips, some are full grade trips, some are outside of that, etc. And just really getting to the discussions I've had about this really go back to what Mike's question, mentioned in the first place, is the objective and the purpose of that trip. And so I know that there's a lot of hands up, so I don't have too much more to say tonight, but I just think it's worthy of a bigger discussion, because it's come up in so many circles, and we are a committee focused on equity. And so it makes sense to talk about it in this group too.
Thank you. Elizabeth and then Maxine.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if we ever have tried to, ask parents to say, you know, like when we ask them for the $50 or whatever it is for the Great Escape trip, you know, do we ever ask them for like extra money, or like, whether it was an entire additional $50 or whether it was just like $5 towards? Okay, we do ask them. Okay, cool. I just wondered because it seems like some people would be able to contribute.
And the issue is right now the price point, you know, it's like $70 per kid, and even when we ask for additional support, I'm still concerned with the access.
And for families who don't want to
And
ask for that.
Correct, Chris. I mean, there's the hidden piece about the Gilderland secret that nobody wants to say, that they need help.
And it's not just field trips. I mean,
No.
there's class projects.
Correct.
I mean, I'm a Gilderland graduate, and I remember a class assignment that was to like go to a restaurant, which you don't think about a family that can't afford that. And that's an equity piece in our education system that, you know, it's hard to think around like what's the value of the project versus what are you putting on families that aren't going to ask for anything and are going to feel very much like, okay, well, I guess we just won't have this month so that my kid can do that.
Thank you. Maxine and then Blanco.
I feel like my eyes have really been opened. Chris, when you mentioned volunteering as a privilege, it occurred to me like I'm part of National Honor Society, and I am able to get in a car where my parents pay for gas that is accessible to me 24/7 and independently drive myself there and take the time out of my day to do that. And like that really, and it shows like, again, the Gilderland problem. And I think Dr. Vera said fundraising opportunities. I think that fundraising opportunities are a great thing, but it's hard for students to realize that fundraising is like, it affects other people. Like my grade, I think, is notoriously awful for not fundraising. Like, and it causes like things like prom tickets to be more expensive and like class-wide activities to be more expensive. And it's because like most people don't realize that them not fundraising really can affect another person. So I think that's a tough thing about fundraising because it does take time to send out an email or go door to door and ask people to buy their product or like look at the flyer or whatever. So I think there's maybe a problem of like not being able to realize that not everyone is at that same like level, and people don't realize like how their like lack of action like might affect other people in the end.
Thank you for that, Maxine. Both parts of it, both the privilege piece with volunteering, and then also, yeah, that last part with with fundraising. I almost said chaperone with fundraising. Yeah. We had Blanca and then Mary, and there's some good discussion, by the way, just in the chat. You know, the cost of things going up. It's everything, and yeah, yearbooks are no exception. Sorry.
Yep. So it's Blanca. I was going to say something similar to Maxine in terms of fundraising. We have to consider our whole community. It's expensive for parents. I'm one of them, right? To pay for $30 for a banquet here and, field trips here. It adds up. But then additionally, some of these fundraising efforts are also difficult for our local businesses. So I'm friends with a local business owner, and she told me she was solicited like 10 times for something that we're fundraising for at the high school. And she said to me, it's embarrassing to have to tell the parents that I can't afford it, but we're a small business. We were focused on food. We're not quite a restaurant. And, we can barely pay the rent. And so I just feel like that's something important as well, because in a lot of the groups that I'm a part of, it's always like, well, let's fundraise, let's sell. But think about at the end of the day, who it is we're selling to. It's also people in our community. I was involved in the tennis banquet this year. I helped organize that. And we had parents that told us that $25 was too much for them, that it would meant that they couldn't attend the banquet and clap for their kids, but at least their kid could go this year. So I just say that for whoever's listening. We really do have to keep not only those costs in mind, but what we're asking of the community around us.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I definitely agree. Mary? You're still muted.
There we go. My camera's not working, but at least this is. You know, there's so much valuable exchanges going on here. And, you know, the common thread is how much everyone cares about making sure that those who may not be able to afford to do something with classmates or their peers, how can we make that happen for them? And, you know, I don't think there's a quick answer. I don't know if this committee is the good point to maybe start. When we talk about fundraising, and I agree, when you keep hitting businesses up to buy those little cards, that's a lot. I know when I was at Guilderland Elementary for a scholarship fund, we did garage sales. And that works out really well. You know, and some parents said, well, let's do a bake sale while you're doing your garage sale. And, you know, we would just afford the people a space and they could bring their stuff. And, you know, I think we can all be creative if we can all get our thoughts together, like the banquets. Maxine, you're right. Banquets are so expensive. And, you know, if all of us agreed, if we said, okay, let's just do it at the school in the cafeteria, and, respect that not everybody can afford the $30 to go to a restaurant, and not, just not exclude anyone because of that. So again, I don't know if this is maybe something we need to look at as a group and maybe come up with some suggestions of how we can remedy this. But it's a concern. I know each school tries to handle their own. I know middle school, you have your backpack program, and, Guilderland Elementary does, and I'm sure, everyone else does, and even with clothing. But maybe if we somehow got everyone together and we're on the same page, we could share this and share the ideas of what they're doing.
Blanca, and then Chris.
I just wonder if it's overreaching to establish some sort of recommendation, try to keep things at X cost, or try not to go over X cost, or be mindful of, X limit. I'm just putting that out there.
Chris, you're still muted.
So I'm enjoying this conversation because I think this is a really important piece of the equity that we're focusing on, but it's not the only one. So I'm thinking of like that Great Escape trip. And in 2 years, when I have a 6th grader who's currently he's in a wheelchair, how much is he going to enjoy that Great Escape trip? And then other kinds of equity, like we have a trip going to see a play, and I'm really proud of our district pushing to make sure that there was going to be sign language interpretation, because we were told no. And we have DHH students who may not house in our district, but they go to our schools. And, we pushed to make sure that that's something that's offered when we take kids to those productions, because we can't ask necessarily that our in-district interpreters provide all of that, because that's pretty intense interpretation services, and ADA requires that those are provided. So, I work in the entertainment industry as a side gig, and I know that for a fact. Like when you have a concert, you have to provide interpretation in case somebody wants to attend. But when we're thinking about these trips, it's not just going to be about money. It's going to be about equity across lots of things. If somebody's not English language learned and needs support in that, how are we providing for any field trip, whether it's physical ability, intellectual ability, all of these services, and making sure that everyone, and you don't want to be the kid for the reason that we don't go on that trip. Oh, we didn't go to the Great Escape because some kids couldn't afford that. We didn't go on that trip because those kids wouldn't be able to enjoy it. And then, kids know, they know when they're the person being for whom everyone else is missing out.
And I will say that example was a perfect, opportunity for us as a district to educate the theater about their responsibilities with, hosting school productions in terms of providing that service. So, Chris, thank you for sharing that example. I forgot about that before.
I think this is great conversation. As timekeeper, I just want to keep us on task and just let folks know that we do still have the equity audit update, food for thought, and a learning component in the next 27 minutes. So I think that this is something that everybody's really passionate about, and we should dedicate either a meeting or some time to really explore and flesh out some of the great points and concerns that have been brought up thus far. But I just wanted to make sure that I have the arduous job to keep us on task.
Thanks to decide.
So Matt, equity update as fast as you can shell it out.
I'm sorry. I'll start with that. Thank you. So real quick, and please, Dr. I'll fill in any of the holes here. So over the past month, the equity teams from each of the buildings met and did some more work on their action plans. The elementary buildings all met on Monday the 13th, with the secondary buildings meeting on Tuesday the 14th. And everyone's fairly deep into their plans. And one of the things that has surfaced with this is also connecting this work to our upcoming Superintendent's Conference Day. We have on Monday, March 6th, our final action planning day for each of the teams. And so that's coming up next week, where all 7 buildings will be together that day and bring to fruition work that includes everything from the focus groups, which were, student, staff, parent, and community members, from the equity learning walks, which happened, from the 5 different workshops and trainings that happened, from our data analysis days and all those different things. That's what the plans are representation of. And they're going to be shared out with the staff across each building on the 17th. And that also gives time for further feedback on the plans, and then also for us to be able to think future facing in terms of implementation going into next year and beyond from the 1, 3, 5+ year lines. Anything you want to add, Dr. Wells, to that?
Just to underscore how important it is to have a plan and goals and measurable steps along the way to help us stay on track and, get where we want to go. And the teams have been working very hard. They're using a data-driven approach to identify priorities and the ways to address those priorities. And I want to applaud the work of the teams on the plans, and Matt's assistance, and our work with Natalie McGee has been really worthwhile. I'll just end there.
Wonderful. So we have the food for thought topic next.
I can frame this briefly. I'm pretty sure we're not going to be able to get too far into a conversation about this, but about a month or so ago, there was an extensive story in some of the local news outlets about Union College seeking input on their nickname, which is the same as ours. The Dutchman. We've had conversations whether it's Dutchman, Dutchmen, Lady Dutch. So anyway, at a recent board member meeting, we had a community member come and make a public comment that, in her opinion, it's time for Guilderland to talk about our nickname. And so one of the places we thought would make some sense to talk about it was this committee. And so SEMA recommended that we bring it to the steering committee, which met to plan this meeting, and now I'm bringing it to you. So that's kind of the genesis of the topic, and I'll leave it at that and see if there are comments or thoughts and where it fits in the scheme of things things we want to work on. Go ahead, Mary.
Is someone suggesting it needs to be changed? Is that what I'm assuming?
Yes.
Huh. Is there a reason the person said why they think it should be changed?
If one of the board members wanted to, Blanca, if you want to jump in there.
Well, the comment that stands out to me, like the line in the public comment, was that it celebrates colonialism.
Mary, I think someone sent it. Well, I can try and find the article. I think she shared it too with us about Union College changing the name, and then she came and spoke at the public board meeting about it. But Blanca, I think, kind of hit the nail on the head. I'll try and find it and send it.
Okay, right. If you could, so I'm assuming because this area was settled by the Dutch, and right. Okay.
Go ahead, Julianne.
You're muted.
You really think at this point I would have this down? Speaking just sort of as a coach who coaches the boys team, but also is involved co-coaching the girls team during indoor and cross country, it is a little odd to be saying we're the Dutchmen for a team of female athletes sometimes. Like that feels a little uncomfortable for me, to be perfectly honest. It's like we're the Dutchmen, but we're not men. We're female athlete team. And then with the flying ship, it's like, well, is the flying ship our mascot, or is the Dutch man our mascot? Like that, I think it's inherently a little bit confusing. But as far as the piece being that that the Dutchman does represent sort of the historical piece of like that this was settled by the Dutch colonialists, I do think it's also very backward looking, right? Like that's where we come from. And I think that sometimes it makes sense to think about nicknames and mascots and symbols that are kind of forward looking. So I guess that would be sort of my perspective, is that the man aspect of it, I think, is confusing for the female contingency of the school. And I think that while it certainly is attempting to reflect on the tradition and the history of the area, I think sometimes it makes sense in these times to look at a more forward-looking kind of representation.
Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, sure. I don't necessarily have anything to add about the Dutchman piece, but I would just add to the conversation, Julian, what you were saying about the girls teams and the boys teams. I know that there have been kind of different things done with like Lady Dutch or just Dutchmen, and I know that hearing from some of the girls in my experience, some of them embrace the idea of Lady Dutch and some of them really don't, and really feel like it insinuates that they are less than. There's like the athletic logo, and then there's the girls version, which makes them lesser athletes. And so I would just say, whichever direction eventually this conversation turns, to ensure that it would be gender neutral, because it also, both of those just assume two genders in the first place. But yeah, like that historical, I do remember the Dutchman. There was like a guy wearing a mascot. We did used to have somebody in a suit that was supposed to represent that, and we did use the big ship. Regan, you'd be better as to when we adopted the actual G, but that didn't used to be a thing. The G is a much better logo than the ship, in my personal opinion, because it is kind of confusing. Like, how is a ship motivating? But anyways, my point was really just about the female, the boys girls teams, and making sure that the girls teams aren't lesser athletes or aren't perceived as such than the boys teams.
All right, so I'm gonna make an executive decision and have Maxine have the last word on this particular topic before we go on to the learning outcomes. Sorry, Mary. Go ahead, Maxine.
Oh, Ms. Schmitz can take my position, take my spot. I was just gonna say I think a ship is a lame mascot.
Perfect. Mary, your comments, and then we'll move on.
I was just going to say, I think we should do a student survey. I know when my daughter was at Ithaca, and Julianne, you'll appreciate this, they're the Bombers, and they wanted to change it because it was like, that was really offensive being the Bombers. And they did a survey and they were going to get a mascot, and ultimately nothing changed. But maybe we can get a student survey because it's the kids that this really affects, and see how they're feeling about it.
I think those are great points. And also a lot is happening in the chat that I also would be curious about, Seema. But with that, I think I am turning it. Oh, who am I turning it over to, Matt, for learning? Chris, right? Yes, Chris. I'm turning it over to you for the learning component.
To me. And as a Dutch person, I would not be offended at all if we stopped being the Dutchmen, but that's just my little 2 cents. So when I reviewed the questions, thankfully, this is kind of an easy tie over from the whole conversation on field trips in some ways, because when I reviewed the questions I sent out, a lot of it is that I respect that we have a lot of different people in this group who might have some great input on opportunities that tie into the learning experience, the learning component that are out there that our students would benefit from. So I got to pull up I'm not checking my phone. I'm looking at my questions, which means I have to get off of the Dutchman stuff. First, any standout opinions or thoughts? The first chapter, oh gosh, I need to find I had it and then I got researching the Dutchman. So that was fascinating. Sent emails, sorry. I sent him emails. Found it. Standout reactions to Chapter 9, Tragedy to Triumph. And we're using the chat a lot. So if there's anything anybody wanted to add in the chat instead of speaking out loud, that is definitely welcome. But I thought that the author had some really great Tragedy to Triumph, just to talking about their experiences. The 2 tours of the historic homes was a really big component of that. Did anyone have anything they wanted just to throw out there before we touched on specific questions as they were reading? On either chapter, I'll throw it on there. All right. So when I reread the first 2 questions I sent out, 2 and 3, they're kind of similar.
Yeah, my only dissonance is what happens if the home environment is not conducive to chapter 9 and 10. That's my question.
I would ask you to say more, and then we'll get Blanca.
I just think that there are some experiences that are shared in both chapters that are predicated on the fact that you can do that. So what happens if you can't do that? That's it.
Like go and tour various historical homes.
Exactly. Okay. What happens if you can't do that?
Well, and I wonder if there's an opportunity there for the schools to provide, like as a school committee. Yeah. Blanca? Where'd you go?
I was actually trying to give Mike a high five. So, but I accidentally raised my hand. I do have a general comment about the book that I would like to make at the end of the conversation.
I suspect I have the same feeling, is that a lot of the chapters talk about, and then you're home, you can do all of these wonderful things and have all this and have art, commission art for your family. And we've month by month visited, like, you know, who has time for that or money? But in order to, in the spirit of the limited time we have left, when I look at my questions, 2, 3, and 6 are all asking for this group to, if you had any suggestions of experiences you've had, places you've been that do in fact like cultivate the voices of the marginalized, experiences that our students would benefit from. I think of Tibisai's awesome book collection that she created and curated. I wonder if, Matt, could we send out some opportunity? I have teams that are always looking for field trip ideas, clubs that would love to have input like that. If you went to the Albany Institute of Art or something locally, that would be an opportunity for our students to learn and hear other voices. I recently went to SUNY Poli-Sci, and I mean, it was fascinating on the science side of things, but it was also exciting to hear about women in STEM and marginalized groups in STEM and things like that. And it was actually a Guilderland graduate who was doing a large portion of the presentation. So if people had that, that's definitely a resource. You guys are a resource to our schools. I would love to steal your ideas because that's something I look forward to this group for. So Tibisai?
Well, one of the things, and I don't know if we do this, but we do know that the Underground Railroad, like we have a whole house right in Albany. But thinking about maybe even making that a situation where it becomes a longitudinal field trip where you might be able to go to different points in New York State where there was an Underground Railroad location, visiting Harriet Tubman's house, things like that. But yeah, I agree also with some of the comments that are in the chat that putting it back on the parents can sometimes feel like it's this like endless trying to enrich the lives of children and students. But I will counter that with the fact that I think that when you are coming from a marginalized community, you're struggling every day to make sure that your kids know where you come from, and you're bombarded by a community that you might not identify with. And I know that that's definitely my experience. So it's hard to, like, when I look at this book, I think about, oh my God, these are such great suggestions that a person who isn't from a marginalized community might not be thinking of. That would be great to incorporate once in a blue in their family dynamics. Because I made the comment about my dad, but my dad really cannot talk to my kids. And that's like a reality that I have to face. And seeing that is heartbreaking in a lot of ways, to see that erasure of one's culture. It can be very psychologically daunting. And I think that it's important for us to go back to the community pieces, and that's where I feel like we've become so disconnected. And it would be great if we had, yes, affinity groups, but maybe like parent groups or ways to support each other as parents in making some of these opportunities possible, and partnering with the school district to make those opportunities possible as well. So just those are some of my thoughts in reading some of these, and then thinking through opportunities. So for March, we just moved, which is why I wasn't at the last meeting. We're in oh my God, I don't even know where I am. I'm still in Guilderland, Pine Bush, but my son is now in Pine Bush. And in March, we're doing mystery readers, and I can't say it too loud, but I'm gonna go in and do a mystery reading thing, which is great and fun. But I saw that one of the parents before me, she's reading a book about Puerto Rican culture, and I am coming in and reading a book about Dominican culture called Island Boy, which is so cool. But thinking about intentional ways of taking some of those already curated opportunities and say to the parents, instead of just pick a book, hey, make it a book that really embodies a community that we might not have exposure to in our classroom, or that you're really passionate about. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Thank you. Seema and then Nina.
Sorry, muted. Just one comment about the book. Not necessarily that we have to agree or disagree about the book, but I like the fact I don't particularly love the book, but I do like the book because it's brought some good discussions. I also feel like Rebecca sometimes is getting through the days celebrated, and I can't always relate to some of the suggestions that they have. But at the same time, I know after the last meeting we had, like a couple of people had contacted me, and I think they were listening to the meeting, and they were really thankful that we brought up a couple of people had brought up the fact that kids are adopted and don't really know their heritage, and how it becomes a really it becomes a really tough discussion at home. And so it's just one of those things that I don't know if we would have even talked about that had we not talked about or discussed this book. So it just reminds me of book club, that we don't necessarily all have to agree to like the book, but just the discussions that it brings is, to me, that's super valuable. So I don't remember which group it was. Maybe it was Tyann, your group. You were saying you're all educators in your group, but I'd love to see too what books you guys bring up in your own districts and your book clubs there. Just because there's so many out there, it's good to get some feedback from people who are involved in that. But yes, I could go either way about the book.
Thank you. Nina?
Yeah, along the same lines that what was suggested, I think if we're making this more tangible, if we use this as more of an educational resource, and don't necessarily want to put it onto the parents to have to take on the responsibility. One idea that I keep going back to is guest speakers. I've had people in my classroom who work for the Albany History Museum, and she spoke about the Great Migration, local Great Migration landmarks that we have in our surrounding area, and places our students have ridden by many times. It really helps to make that come alive. So, and even on another bigger scale, like Holocaust survivors and people like that who could come in and speak to their own experiences, students are really affected by it. So if we don't have the means to physically bring them to places, that doesn't stop us from facilitating speakers to come into buildings and present as well.
Thank you. I also think it's important to remember that this woman is homeschooling. So she is taking on the role of the school, and this is her job pretty much, I guess, is when you homeschool, it's all there, and that's what she's committed to doing. And when you're raising children and having jobs and things and sending them to school every day, it's probably not fair to compare those things in the same way. In the honor of time, I did really like the idea of incorporating art, music, poetry into your home and making sure that those selections reflect the diversity of our country. So the last question I had is, what would help you in that area? Do you feel like when you are able to have those experiences with your family, and it ties also into the idea of a hard history, do we utilize those modes of learning to involve diversity?
I can speak on that. I know, for us personally in my house, my husband is classically trained percussionist. So he takes my daughter, who is 9 now, to a lot of percussion ensembles. He was part of SDO, and he takes her to these concerts constantly. So she's always exposed. Even as an infant, we always had classical music on. She has been exposed to all different types of music, which that is great, because I know if it wasn't for him, our daughter wouldn't get that type of exposure.
Thank you.
I was really interested in your question around learning hard history, because to me, all history can be hard history. But one thing in my household, as being a mixed race household, that I kind of placed a challenge onto my husband and his family and my kid's grandmother was, not leaving the marginalized person to be the one that always has to speak about the hard history, and always having to be the one that has to position it through the lens of victimization and deficit and all of that. And one of the conversations that I have consistently with people is about having and sharing the stories of folks that were allies and were advocates in conjunction with what they were fighting about and what were the struggles that existed during the time. I don't think it has to be one-sided. I think it needs to be multifaceted, but I think that the messenger matters. So in thinking about, obviously, my family's a mixed race family, so it's a little bit different in my household. But really going that community approach, in thinking about how do we learn about these hard histories and involving our friends and our families. I know that for me, my friends of beautiful Dominican women have a lot of influence on my children and them understanding Dominican culture, because there's not a lot of us out here. And when we get together, it's an opportunity to share that. So all of it, art, music, and poetry, important. I think messaging is important. And I also think that not just putting it on the marginalized communities to share is important, and sharing the story of the advocates, of the resistance that has happened from all backgrounds. That Rainbow Coalition kind of mindset is like really something that's important to me, because these issues, all these isms hurt everyone. And I think it's also important that we express how all of these isms hurt everyone, and not exclude anyone in how it's actually painful for all of us when we don't stand up for all of us.
Thank you. And we are out of time because we like to talk. Matt, Tibsai, anything to wrap up with?
I can give Blanca the last word, and then I'm going to need a motion to close out.
Thank you. Last word. I just wonder, when the time comes to consider a new book or the next book to read, if we could perhaps focus on something that will help us with anti-Semitism. I just feel like I'm very concerned with that situation that we have going on, nationally and in our district, per the focus groups that I attended. And so I just want to make sure we keep that on our radar. And I'm also happy to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Blanca, for the motion to adjourn. Can I get a second?
I will second.
Chris, thank you so much. Nina, did you want to second as well, or you had a comment?
Oh, well, I always have a comment, but I was seconding to motion. I was agreeing with what Bianca said. I think that Blanca said that's a very good point, and something that I know came up in other places, to put it that way. So, and things that, I've also experienced as well. So I definitely think that it's an area that gets kind of pushed aside. But again, I'm motioning here.
Yes. So agree with everyone. Anti-Defamation League, lots of good stuff happening in the chat. But for this evening, we are all adjourned. Thank you so much for engaging in this amazing conversation. And Matt, it's going to be you next time, my friend. Back to you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.